The Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. John Henninger, you're in the studio.
Jared LaCrone.
Guess what?
What's
Here we
up?
go. Episode number 50. Ladies and gentlemen, you did it. Thank you so much for being a part of the Central Weekly for 50 episodes. And boy, we've got a great episode ahead of us. Not only are we going to discuss the greatest of these, our standalone love sermon, with the one and only Sarah Henninger.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: I know that we tried. My people talked to her people. It just didn't work out. She's busy.
Yeah,
she's busy.
she started a new job recently. She's volleyball coaching, so she just has a full plate for sure.
And let's be honest, she doesn't like the spotlight.
She
let's be
doesn't.
honest.
Yeah, she doesn't.
And we
It was
threw her in
enough
there.
to get her on stage this weekend. So anything beyond that,
But
it's tough.
I promised we will get her on the Central Weekly soon, because I think there are so many lessons that she has learned along the way, being a preacher's kid, now a preacher's wife, and volunteering and being such a steady rock within Central and within the church as a whole. Gosh, so many things that I want people to know about Sarah that maybe she doesn't want to, but we'll talk about it. But here's the thing. That's a ...
Okay.
Here's our guest for episode 50 of the Central Weekly.
Tell us, Jared.
Dr. David Asbery.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, he's a great guy. He's been a personal friend for a long time, and he's been influential in my family's life.
Yes, mine
he's
too.
Influential here in our community, of course, but all of that based around a godly man. And so I'm excited for you to have that conversation. And as you know, he delivers a lot of babies, and so at least in my mind, the segue between this talk about love to Dr. Asbery is, of course, a lot of times when we're in love, we have
babies
relations, which lead to babies, and then the babies lead to Dr. Asbery's office, and he does a great job taking care of those.
So you got two dudes talking about love this week on the Central Weekly, and we bring in, you could call him a love doctor, right?
Yeah, all right.
In a way.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It is a really great conversation. I'm super excited for people to hear it, because he is able to really chapterize his life already. He's at 54.
Yeah.
And he's able to really say, here's some lessons I've learned at each part of the way, and a really impactful lessons for us. So you got to, maybe if you want to, we won't feel bad if you want to skip ahead. It's okay, but come back. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, because we're going to talk about love, and it's the greatest of these, and that comes from what book of the Bible, John?
So like 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is kind of coined as the love chapter sometimes, and that's really where that comes from.
Yeah. And your first point was love should be at the core of our life.
And I'll tell you why, Jared.
Why?
Because, and you can chase these scriptures down if you want, but so first chapter of Genesis 1 says that we, mankind, were made in the image of God, right? And then you fast forward to the New Testament where it says that God is love. So if we were made in the image of God and God is love, right? So, nice. So if we were made in the image of God and God is love, then love, you were designed to love. We were designed to have love at the very core of us, whether you like it or not.
I can't believe somebody said, I'm not coming next week.
It's no joke. Love. It's for real.
I mean, I guarantee that thought process was not singular. There were definitely some people that, they're talking about love next week. I don't want to come.
Yeah.
But there's we're not talking just couple love here.
And I think, I said it early in the sermon, but I mean, we have lumped it all together.
Yes.
We've romanticized it. We have sexualized it, commercialized it, the word love. And it is so much more than that. It's so much more than a romantic feeling, but it is a godly attribute.
Yeah. It's almost like the word marriage, where marriage was made by God for a reason, and the world has just almost it away and diluted it into something that it's really not anymore in a lot of cases. Love's the same way. We overuse it, we sexualize it, like you said, and it's just not at the it's supposed to be the core of who we are. And like you said, John, even the guys, we are made for love. You might not think you are, but you are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And number two, love defines God, so love should define us.
Yeah, right. Same deal. I mean, we resist it, but Jesus said, "Love." I'll take it a step further than even we were created in God's image. and obviously that, God is love. Take it a step further than that. Jesus said, love one another. Love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. And here it is. Whoever does not love does not know God. So that has huge implications in our life, right? I mean, if you don't love, you don't know God, because God is love. And if your life doesn't line up with that, then you really don't know God.
And you might be thinking, oh, it's hard for me to love. Well, if you're a Christian, you've got the Holy Spirit, and I forget how you worded that, but the Holy Spirit makes it obvious.
Right. So love is more than a relationship or a feeling, but it is the external proof of the relationship that matters the most, right? I mean, the Bible says if Jesus is the Savior of your life, then the Holy Spirit is promised to live inside of you. And part of what the Holy Spirit does is produces evidence that's obvious to the world around, that Jesus is the Lord of your life. And at the top of that list of what the Holy Spirit produces in our life is love.
L-O-V-E, love. I'm glad if people didn't know how to spell it. It's an instant song. I remember I tried out for, I think in high school, I tried out for The Wizard of Oz, and I think I sang that song in a Frank Sinatra style.
Did you really?
And I won the part of the Tin Man.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not boasting here, people. These are just
Congratulations.
facts. These are facts. Number 3, God, like love, is sacrificial. Right? There's more.
And it's not a comma. It's not God like love. It's God like love. And so the loving like God is a sacrificial love. I mean, God so loved the world, he gave his only son. And then greater love has no man than this, to lay down his life for his friends. That's what Jesus did. And so we see in Scripture, just a godly love is a sacrificial love for sure.
Yeah, John 13, you went really a couple verses into there, but the big example of this for you is to prove to the world, like God, like Jesus did when he came in his sacrificial love. That's the example that we can do to be an example to others.
I mean, Jesus literally said, the love that you have for one another will show the world, will prove to the world who you actually belong to.
And we got to stop there. That is so key, and we forget about it all the time. We as a body and as Christians, when we don't love well, we don't show Christ well. And we have to be different from the world. The world can figure out what they think is love, and that might be appealing. But when we really love, when we choose encouragement, like you've talked about, when we choose unity, that's going to be appealing to a non-Christian. That's going to be appealing to the world around it. And that's
certainly a contrast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. God knows what he's talking about.
You can do a lot of great things. You can try for a lot of great things. You can train and read and do a bunch of stuff to develop some great things in your life. Yeah. But in John 13, Jesus lays it out and says, your love is what's going to prove to the world that you're my disciples.
And here's the thing. I prepped you for this. You said that you were going to have this ready. You talked about that you're opposite in Sarah in every way. Right. And then I wanted you to have a list of things that you've kept wrong about Sarah in this relationship. So go ahead, prepare that list. Go ahead with that now.
Yeah.
No way.
I was like, uh-oh.
So here's the thing. I joked about this. The opposite of Sarah in every way. That's a country song. Say that again. That little again. And you said it with a twang, I thought.
Did I?
Maybe I just heard twang.
I said that Sarah and I are opposite in every way, except for what really matters. Like the core of our foundational stuff.
Maria,
how are we going to raise our kids? What's our faith going to look like? What is it? All that kind of stuff. But other than that, we're pretty opposite. She is, I said, she's the neat to my messy, the plain burger to my bacon deluxe. She's the baby dolls to my Tonka truck, the woe to my man, the counterpart, and the partner that God knew that I needed.
Woe to my man?
Yeah, woe man.
Okay. See, country song. If you put an alcoholic reference in there, maybe that could be a hit on the country records.
Nice.
But you're not going to do that. But here's the thing. I loved how, I think Sarah said that about when we're patient and kind, that's when we're like Jesus.
Yeah.
And those attributes, like you said earlier about the Holy Spirit that breathes and proves that example with Jesus, that's how we love like Jesus. We're patient and we're kind, we're humble. And again, she said things that have worked well for you guys, and she's learned communication, transparency, and similar to that, honesty. You guys, I want to say brutally honest is a funny word we use. Don't you think? Funny phrase?
Yeah.
Because shouldn't we just be honest? And sometimes it can be taken brutally. Of course, if we say it in a wrong way, but we have to be transparent with our spouse. If we're hiding something,
Right.
or we're trying to be something that we're not, that's not going to grow a relationship. That's just going to stun it from the very beginning.
Should your spouse have the passcode to your phone?
Yes, absolutely.
Should your spouse, if you have Life 360, should your spouse be able to see where you are?
What's life? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What should be kept a secret from your spouse?
Nothing.
Wow, nice.
Nothing. I think if you're honest with your spouse, even with your sins and your downfalls, she needs to be, and her, if vice versa, they need to accept the grace that you've been given with God, and know that, if you're not continuing in this sin, I'm not saying that, but if they know your shortcomings, they show grace to you. That builds love. That's how God shows us love. He gave us grace. And if our spouse does the same thing for us, they're showing God to us.
Yep, that's one thing Sarah said in the forgiveness section of this. God forgives us, especially in marriage. Forgiveness is really that path forward, She said this too, but I mean, forgiveness is for sure not that free pass.
No.
That's not what it is. Don't let your spouse cheat on you. Don't let yourself be abused.
Boundaries still need to be put up.
But at the same time, don't hang on to every little thing and bring it up in every little fight, because that's going to get old and it's not going to work out.
That's forgiveness. I mean, you could do probably a whole series on just forgiveness, even within a close godly relationship, especially with your spouse.
Yeah.
Just because we hold on to things, and it's when you can't be the spouse that has done something wrong and then scream at the other spouse, I need forgiveness, forgive me.
Yeah.
You can't do that, but you also can't be on the other end where they are on the right path, they're doing better, and you're kind of just still keeping track of things, and everything that they do wrong past that, you're going to bring up the past things that they've done wrong. And again, I think the Bible knows what it's talking about when it says don't keep record of wrongs. It's going to destroy and erode relationship.
Yep. I've known people who have, like, there's been an affair. Something super serious on one side or the other. And then the one spouse will say, I've forgiven them and we're going to move on. But then every subsequent fight, the affair comes right back. And so, if it's truly not something that you can move on from, then that's got to be obviously addressed.
And addressed. Yeah. I don't know your CCM song.
Matthew West. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Everybody else knew that except for me. Here's the thing that you did at the end, which I really, 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 really appreciated. A prayer. It is crazy the amount, as pastors here on staff, the amount of prayer requests we get are centered around relationships and marriages, and how God or Satan is attacking marriages, especially even within this church, especially within this church.
Yeah.
I don't want to say especially sounds like.
No, right. But I mean, I said this on stage, but I pray regularly, nearly daily, for marriages inside the church to be stronger than marriages outside the church. Just as, like we talked about earlier, as a point of contrast, as a difference from the world around. Talk about something that could be a testimony, because marriage is a God-ordained union. It's God-made thing. So of course, marriage is under attack. And one of the biggest weapons that the enemy uses against marriage is a self-centered mindset in love. Yeah,
and that's the thing that I learned getting into a serious relationship. You think that you might know, I'm selfish, but then when you get into a serious relationship, you should understand how really selfish you were before then. Because that person, that sounds bad, brings out your selfishness. No, it helps you understand how selfish you are. And again, like you said, I think towards the beginning of the sermon, a marriage relationships is what you said is the best example of,
before Sarah came up, I mean, like a marriage is definitely the most shaping relationship that we have on earth. It's the single most important earthly relationship that we have. And, we talk about relationships matter the most. A marriage is a great place where you're not necessarily, there's days where you're not necessarily happy, but all of this interaction and learning from each other is, Lord willing, shaping you into becoming a more holy person.
Yeah. And you said the word commitment, and that's a whole other issue with our society too. We're not a committed person. I think and it's our consumerist society where, like, if I'm not happy with this, I'm going to move on. Right. I think we take that into our relationships too.
That's a good point,
and I think that's why you've got a lot of people that are getting married older in life, and then there's a danger there too. I mean, in some, because you've got all of these opinions that have been put in for 30, 40 years of your life, and now you're going to try to put a spouse into there. That's going to be difficult. It's not saying that it can't be done, and there's a lot. That's not what I'm saying, but here's the facts. When we're not committed, a relationship's not going to work.
Sure.
And I think, and then, because we need to be committed so that we show the world, that the world may know.
Nice.
I think that the world, somebody wrote that song, right? Is that Matthew West?
No.
John Henninger. Yeah. But here's another cool thing that you did right at the end, and I appreciated it.
What was it?
Because again, you've got a lot of single people in the audience or in our church family that are listening. So we didn't. Hopefully they didn't tune this out. But at the end, even in our faith, with that commitment, that's what we're doing. Again, there might be times where you feel that God has abandoned you. You might feel that something has happened, or there's a hardship that happens in your life, and then you're going to just quit on that relationship with God. That's not what we got to do. We got to stay committed and understand that He's always there. He has not abandoned you, and you will never not be His child.
Yeah, I mean, there's in all areas of love, your friends, your family, your spouse, even your faith, there's going to be an ebb and flow. You know, I mean, there's going to be ups and downs, goods and bads, sickness and health. But if we go into it with, I mean, you're never going to be fully prepared for it, but if you can go into it with some sort of a realization that that's coming, then it can help you stay committed through the tough time. It'll help you dance in the rain of life storms.
That's really good. That's really good. The biggest disappointment for me this weekend that you and Sarah didn't dance off stage during that. You just could have just went off.
Oh, we danced.
Did you really?
No.
Okay, I was like, did I miss something?
No.
Here's gosh, what a really neat element.
Later.
What a really neat element to end. I love that song, by the way, too, from I think Joel Barnes and Elevation.
Is that
I think so.
Yeah, it's Elevation for sure.
Yes.
I didn't know yet.
But just what a great song to end with, and to see those relationships, those commitment, those years in some cases of fruitful, some really hard sometimes marriages. It was really neat.
Yeah.
And we got a big response. We had over 150 pictures that came in. So that's
cool.
300 people.
Yeah.
One of my favorites was the Bowers.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that one.
Bob and Donna Bauer, that video that I think Nikki took.
And I think it was online. I think it was on Facebook. But gosh, because Bob was just a giant of a man.
Yeah.
And for just that, it was. And I know it was blurry, but just you could see the sweetness and the commitment in that. Yeah, it was a really sweet moment at the end, seeing all those pictures, and it was a great way to wrap up our Love at Central weekend.
Yeah, right. I mean, hopefully everybody has a great Valentine's Day, but beyond just the commercialized, romanticized version of love, that we can have a better understanding of a God-like love.
Yep. Now let's get to the love doctor.
Oh, come on.
He's going to hate that. But here's Dr. David Asbery, the conversation that I wanted you guys to hear. So many life lessons for us. And we're back with the Central Weekly, and we have a very special guest in the studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Asbery. David, say hi.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm super glad that you're here. I'm super glad that we get a chance to chat with one another. Well, this has been a couple months that we've wanted to have you on the show, because if anybody has talked to you in the atrium, they know that you've got some great stories to tell, because you've lived some life, don't you think?
Yes, there's an understatement.
He looks tired when he says that, when he answers that question. But here's the cool thing. I think there's a lot of lessons that you've learned along the way. We're going to get into your military career, or part of your life, and how's that shaped into your medical practice and to the community that you serve, and also, probably most importantly, your relationship with God and your relationship with your family. And I know that these lessons that you've learned along the way and are really impacting you today, sitting across the table from me, are lessons that a lot of our listeners could really benefit from. So, Dr. David Asbery, we're going to start something new with episode 51 that we haven't done yet. We teased a little bit with Sarah last week, but this week we're going to do what we're calling, just to kind of break the ice. People, if they don't know about David Asbery, this is going to break the ice. So we're going to call it rapid fire. Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions. You give me your knee-jerk reaction, or answer. Probably not reaction. That might not be good. So, okay, we're going to start off slow, and then we'll kind of maybe go a little deeper along the way. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, David Asbery, here we go with rapid fire. What's your favorite food?
Carbonara.
What is your favorite vacation spot?
Any beach, anywhere.
You have a day to yourself. What do you do?
Usually worry what everybody else is doing.
You go to person in the Bible. Who do you identify with most?
David.
Most memorable moment as a parent?
Usually my parenting failures.
I can identify with that. Thing you love most about Central?
Their relationship with the community.
Biggest fear.
Inadequacy.
All right. See, that's it. Now you're off the hook with rapid fire. So we're going to go back. I want to talk a little bit about your childhood because the cool thing is you're not a local boy. No. You are a Southern, I don't want to say gentleman. I don't know if people really say that.
No gentleman. Southern redneck.
You were raised in the South. So start us back then.
So I was actually in an odd state. I grew up in Kentucky. So if you're from the South, they consider you Northern. And if you're from the North, you're considered Southern. So I grew up in Central Kentucky.
Okay. What part?
South of Lexington, about an hour, near a little town near Danville. But ironically, my nearest neighbor was about 2 miles away.
Okay. And growing up, what is the childhood? Kids like? How many siblings?
I have a brother 7 years older and a sister, I think, 12 years younger. Mm-hmm. So it's middle child syndrome.
It's middle child. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the special. Do you listen to comedy at all?
I do.
Nate Bargatze, he's did a comedy special recently, and he did something really funny about his middle child. But he's the oldest, so he identifies. Mm-hmm. Raised in Kentucky, what was childhood like for you?
This is the point where my wife usually rolls her eyes and says, "Not again." I grew up, parents, very lower middle class, farmers. Farmers in Kentucky during that time were probably some of the most poor people around. So it's not a sob story. It's just, but we were probably some of the very poorest people around. Yeah. My mother had something called borderline personality disorder, so it was kind of a rough childhood with that. And my saving grace was I had a grandparent that lived very near, and nanny mom, and so it was always being shuffled back and forth between those and trying to maintain some facsimile of sanity. I always laugh to my wife. I was a very unlovable child, and was always a little insecure and growing up in that situation. But anybody that's dealt with a borderline, it's always quite an interesting experience. Yeah. My dad actually did not read or write when he was alive, and my mom had a GED. So it was was always kind of just kind of existed. I guess existence would be how I would have described it.
Just survived. Mm-hmm. Do you think education played a role for you? How that kind of impacted you later?
I think it was a massive role. I think the one thing my mom did do, and she had grown up with parents who actually had been a little bit higher level than that. Yeah. And anytime the bookmobile came around, and I remember the bookmobile with passion, and she would take me to the library, and because I could leave her alone back then, and I was living in a farmhouse with no really cable. I remember sitting down and reading encyclopedias when you get bored, or those long games of Monopoly over weeks with your brother. So, so I think education was if you have a book, you can go anywhere. Yeah. And that was the saving grace for me.
What about church life in the South?
Church life in Kentucky, I actually grew up in a church that was a little bit oppressive. It was a very intense Church of God, but not even one of the modern ones. It was one of those, if you did not go your Bible verse, you would actually get spanked. So it was one of those places that, until I got older and really developed a relationship with God, I really just saw the hellfire and brimstone part of God. Yeah. So my wife was much more religious than me. Several times I've skirted it, but it took several years for me to really develop that relationship with God. I started when I was in the Marine Corps, and then pulled back because of some letdowns to the church. And I remembered that the church didn't let me down. Finally, I figured out God didn't let me down. It was the church that I was attending had kind of failed me. And I hate to say that, but those were some low points in my life, and that the church had not been the church that I needed. So really my true spirituality, and I don't like that word much, but really my relationship with God really developed intensely, probably in Georgia before I moved here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's back up just a little bit. The Marines, probably coming out of that situation, higher education probably wasn't high school right into college. Marines, was it? Why that? Why then?
I was an oxymoron. I had an ACT of 32 and a GPA of 2.0.
Really?
Yes. And worked 40 hours a week at McDonald's in the recession during the 80s. I took the check home so we didn't lose the family farm. Yeah. And it's not a sob story. In fact, I would have not done anything if it had not been for that. Yeah. The Marine Corps gave me something to belong to, and I hadn't. And I was really sci-fi geek. I always wanted to, believe it or not, be an astronaut. So
Really?
the way to do that was to go to the Marine Corps, apply to try to be a fighter pilot, and hopefully get it picked up to the academy, Naval Academy.
Yeah.
And then maybe get into NASA at that junction. That
Yeah.
was the big dream. The problem is you can have big dreams, but a dream without a plan or is really just a torment. And
Yeah.
so the Marine Corps was where I went to do that, but I didn't really truly have a plan in place. And I had not been exposed to the world to know how to develop those plans.
Yeah.
That nobody to show me those steps.
Yeah.
And so what the Corps really did show me, and I was always a very hard worker. I grew up on a farm and would work and work and work, but the Corps showed me the importance of the 3 Ds: discipline, dedication, and desire. Desire without dedication, discipline is just torment. And dedication without desire is useless.
Yeah.
And so you have to put those together to go. And so really God put me in the Marine Corps to mature me. And I actually was in for about a year and a half and actually damaged an ankle bad enough that I had to get out. And I had an appointment to the Naval Academy out of enlisted Marine Corps. And when I look at it, I probably still wasn't mature enough to have made that cut. They were going to send me to 6 months of a preparatory school and everything. But I really think God put you places to get you ready for the next step. And that wasn't his plan. It was my plan, but it wasn't his plan. And I don't think I could have succeeded on my plan. So I came home and entered community college and proceeded to make a 2.0 my first semester.
Okay.
And I had a very pivotal, God also puts those important people in your life at the right time. I had a very pivotal professor who literally walked up to me one day and he said, I know your test scores, I know your ACT scores, and I know that you made corporal in the Marine Corps within a matter of a couple of years, Lance Corporal within a year. He said, you have everything it takes. And I drove an hour each way. I lived with my grandmother and went to community college in Somerset for the first 2 years. And he said, I'm going to be sitting here in this math lab at 6 a.m, and you will be in here studying. And let's just say that he was not nice to me, but he was cultivating, and it's what I needed. And I then ended up getting into medical school without even a bachelor's degree. My wife still makes fun of me. I do not have a bachelor's degree. They led 3 people out of that year into 100 out of 110 slots. And it wasn't that I was the smartest. I'd had double majors of zoology and chemistry, and you couldn't finish that in 4 years. And my scores were good enough got nowhere near the smartest. I would never say that. I was middle of the class, but I just had enough dedication and discipline that I made that cut. So I actually came out of college with like a 3.8 after a 2.0 my first.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but the Marine Corps really gave me the drive, the discipline, the dedication, the desire. And why did I pick doctor? I didn't know anything else to be. I laughed, but God just channeled me into that. School teachers were important to me, but those are probably, I was so poor, the school teachers were the richest people I'd ever met.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, the recessions hit. The bankers were trying to take the family farm, and the lawyers helped them. So I definitely didn't want to be one of those two things.
Yeah.
And then really the family doctor was like that old Norman Rockwell picture, the doctor listening to the little doll.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Doc Adams was.
Yeah.
He delivered my dad. He did my dad's emergency appendicitis. And he was always that person in the community, no matter what, that was there for you and made a difference. So that's who I wanted to be. And I just put my head down and as I've gotten older, I have a lot of other interests. And I think if I had been exposed to other things, I would have done something different. But I think sometimes I always laugh and say, God opens doors and he closes doors. And sometimes he chases you through the door. He really wants you to go. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm not always sure if he'd actually took my request in that I would have been doing this. So, but that's it. So, and I think the other thing that the Corps really did, and everybody said, do you remember what was your proudest moment? And I can't really explain it to people. It was not walking across the medical school stage. To me, it was walking across the parade deck on Parris Island as a private first class from the United States Marine Corps, because you felt like you were part of something bigger.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't explain it. I can still remember walking across Parris Island parade deck much more than I do walking across UK medical school graduation.
And you really, coming from a dysfunctional home, that's probably an understatement.
It gave me a home.
And you could be proud that, hey, I came out of this proud institution.
And it's hard to explain. I still have a brotherhood. My wife laughs. I have a T-shirt that says "Not quite as lean, not quite as mean, but still a U.S. Marine." I was wearing it at Disney, and there must be like 105 people walked up and said, "Oorah, brother," And I think it's very much like Christians. You walk up and you can tell when somebody's walked the walk that you're walking. So, So I think the core, and it took me around the world. By the time I was 19 and 20, I'd been in South Korea, Okinawa, Japan, Philippines. I was in China when they started the Three Rivers Gorge Dam. And I was at Seoul, Korea right when the 80 Olympics started. So those were just places that a farm boy off the Farmville, Kentucky. So it opened up their eyes. And I think travel is so important for our kids to expose them. I've met an awful lot of educated idiots, but I have never met a well-traveled ignorant person. I mean, that you have to learn to unsee yourself and see other people.
I mean, and that is so true. And I think that's why we want people to understand that we're going to, I think, we're going to go into this a little bit about how important missions are for people and to understand how other people live. So then that really trains you to know, hey, what I have around me is substantial and I need to take advantage of it.
And I enjoy my mission trips with Central immensely. And I'll be very honest, I have been meaning to take my children and want to, because I want my kids to understand that not everybody has an Xbox and an icebox. I mean, and that's really hard to understand. We had the Watutu kids stay at our house several years ago, and they were so amazed they could put popcorn in a microwave. And when we go to Brazil, I'm very careful not to show them pictures of how we live, because our poorest person here is better than the richest person there. And I always tell people, they say, oh, you do medicine, you do this. And most of the mission trips I get to do Central are not in my specialty. And I think I am looking at going back and doing something in my specialty. But, you know, I always laugh and say, I'm the worm on the hook. And somebody says, why? I said, when we go into the last time we went to Haiti, you know, we take this wonderful group of people, this church here, and they teach them about potable water and how to do their health care and how to brush their teeth. And then they're going to do this. And we maybe treat what they have going on that day. And they have never seen a doctor, which is kind of like a witch doctor to them. It's like one of those, you know. I said, but when I'm gone, I told my son, I said, when I'm gone, who takes care of them next week? I said, so I'm the worm on the hook to bait them. I said, but the real hook is get them to know Jesus Christ for eternity. It's not to let the doctor. I mean, I've helped some people, but have I helped them as much as telling them about Jesus? No. I'm more the bait whenever I go on those things, unless I can go on something I can actually do my surgeries.
You bring the people in.
And that's good.
Yeah.
And the people do the real work. The other, and so I'm the least important person on the trip, in my opinion. So, you know,
I don't think they would say that about you.
If you go with Larry Loker, I will tell you I am the least important person on that trip.
He, in every situation, is the most important person ever.
My best mission trip has always been with Annie. She's like a bodyguard, you know, Annie here in church. I mean, I know
I wouldn't cross
safe.
her.
I mean, I'm a former Marine, but as long as Amy's there, I'm okay. I'm safe.
So let's circle back. You went worldwide with the Marines and then went back to Kentucky for medical school.
I came home 2 years in Somerset at a community college. That's why I'm on the Rend Lake College Board, because I'm so dedicated. That's an opportunity for people. 2 years at University of Kentucky, undergrad, 4 years at medical school, then a branch at Chapel Hill, North Carolina for residency. Okay. Which was hard during basketball season. It was really horrible.
Oh, I bet. I bet. So that, and then, after residency, what happens next?
Oh, a long, arduous sob story. The first practice, I left Wilmington, North Carolina, and took a practice in a town of 7,000 people. Okay. One of two doctors, and if you've ever watched the Andy Griffin Show, one of the towns I serviced was Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is Mayberry, and those people were just that nice. Yeah. Wilkesboro, it was literally, back then, there's a 4-lane in now, but it was an hour and a half to Winston-Salem, 2 hours to Charlotte. Although I think I work a lot now, I actually think I worked more then, and I had a lot of advanced surgical training that people just didn't have. So people would drive from Winston-Salem for me to do surgery at a 50-bed critical access hospital, and lived. And God put me in a position that the doctor who I was with had went through multiple partners before me and several after me. Taught me a lot of politics and everything. You want to think that all doctors are really, whenever you go into this field, and they're just humans, just like everybody else. You have wonderful people in law, you have awful people in law. You have wonderful doctors, you have doctors that aren't doing it for the right reason.
It's like every position.
Yeah. We're humans. Yeah. We're sadly inadequate. But
it's crazy that people think because you have that healing touch or that degree that you have to be perfect.
You're not. Yeah. No. In fact, Mark Asbery has one of the books. He spoke here years and years ago, but it's called Let It Go, prior to Disney's movie too. And then we have to embrace our imperfection. I said, I've embraced them intensely my whole life. And so I spent a year and a half there. And then from there, I went to North Alabama, which was a similar situation. They really didn't want a partner. They wanted somebody to split costs, but not split patients with. So within 6 months, they give you an income guarantee, which is a loan. That was gone. I was literally going down and and taking moonlighting jobs at the city hospital. And my wife and I were talking about this in Birmingham. Let's just say that the ER residents in the would wear Kevlar vests.
Oh, man.
It was so dangerous. And so I was to support the family, because everybody thinks when you're a doctor, things just go easy.
Yeah.
But no, it's just no.
So this is Birmingham, late
Alabama.
80s, early 90s?
Oh, this was about 2002.
Okay.
So 2002.
And have you chosen your area yet? Or are you still doing?
Oh, I'm actually out of training. I'm out of residency at this point.
Yep.
So I finished up in Wilmington, North Carolina residency, and then first year and a half was in the North Carolina mountains, beautiful on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And then this is for a year and a half in North Alabama on a.
Okay.
And then from there I went to Georgia, and for about, I always say 6 years, but my wife can usually correct most of my. I'm kind of like a bass fisherman. Everything grows with time. And then we spent time there, and that was a hard job. The day I showed up, I knew it was wrong. Job, and I had to support my family, and I had a lot of wonderful patients, but it was one of those things I had to stay there, because as a doctor, if you move too much, then you get a bad reputation. Very dysfunctional practice. Neither doctor were board certified nor board eligible. They actually build on my board certification. But one of the senior doctors was very abusive, and in fact, I had won the top award in North Carolina for best resident surgeon, and he had me convinced I didn't even know how to do my job within about a couple of years. And
wow.
I think God puts you in a lot of challenging positions to number one, to humble you, but also to teach you, because it was an interesting place in Georgia. I could save somebody's life on Friday, but then when you saw them at the country club, because that's really all there was down there, they wouldn't even speak to you because you weren't there. And in the Deep South is so intensely political. I always laugh. They could insult you one day, 4 days later, you'd wake up at 3 a.m. and say, I should have been mad about that, And growing up poor white trash from rural Kentucky, I always say, I said the first thing that came to mind, which is not always the best thing to do. The Bible tells you not to do that, but that wasn't a lesson I learned very early. So I think God taught me a lot of humility. I think, and it was bad enough people don't realize that a lot of doctors, they're pretty vicious with each other. So I was employed, and there was times that my wife and I were not drawing paychecks, even though I was employed, because they quote unquote didn't have enough money to pay everybody. How poorly practice ran.
Yeah.
And literally, then one day I realized that was a lie, because one of them pulled in a new Mercedes, and I'm sitting here, struggling. In fact, at one point. And I always laugh because people think that it's so easy. Everybody has hard times.
Yeah.
And you learn the most in those hard times. The growth is always in the struggle. At one point, we were living in a rental house that we didn't own, and that friends of ours owned and let us live in for free. And I was looking for a job, but I was at that low point in my life that I couldn't make a hard decision. And my kid's swing set was a garden hose, the older two, thrown over the branch and on the tree in the backyard. And their favorite game apparently was the oldest boy would con the second boy into playing spitting games. They told me many years later. And the oldest boy was on the top bunk, so the bottom boy obviously never won that one. But God just kept lining stuff up. I apparently was still considered a really good doctor, even though I didn't think that well of myself.
Yeah.
I had 6, and I put my wife through and my family through heck trying to make my decisions. I had 6 job offers on the table.
Okay.
Everybody wanted me to come, because I had people driving from other towns coming to me, but I couldn't see that I was still a good person because I was so beat down. And this is exactly, God taught me exactly what abused spouses go through.
Yeah.
I better stay with him because I can't do any better. And I see this in my office all the day, and not just overtly physical abuse, but verbal words are far more hurtful.
Yeah.
And so I sat there, and there was a town called Douglas, Georgia, about an hour away, and they had wanted me for 6 months. And we would go down and visit. We had this Honda minivan, and I remember that's back in GPS as you plugged in, and they really, really, really wanted us down there. And that was the last job, and I was finally getting ready to make that decision, because one of the 2 doctors I was with had a pretty good heart. And he walked in, he said, Dave, this is killing you here. And he said, and I've been with this other person since high school. We're staying together. He said, but you're so much more than what you can do right here. And you need to either, and the other doctors, there were 7 other doctors in town. It was so touching. They had come together as a group and offered to loan me the money to start a practice. Really? Interest-free. They said, if you'll stay, because we want you here to help, because we always call you when it's a tough situation and you're getting beat down. And I felt like I needed to leave. And so I went, and I had actually interviewed in Mount Vernon, Illinois. Because at that point we were so tight on money. She hadn't been home to visit her family for a long time. I hadn't been home to visit. So they paid for us to come up this direction. We stopped and visited her family. I'm like, you Illinois people are Canadian, in my opinion. I mean, it's like, that's like Chicago.
I mean, you've been in the South the entire time.
Oh yeah. And once I left Kentucky, and the funny thing is where I live in Kentucky is the same latitude as you are here. We have the same weather. We're farmers. Y'all are exact same people here, but everybody thinks Chicago.
Oh yeah.
And so we came up here in the middle of an ice storm, and there was a certain doctor in town back then that didn't want any competition, so they hid me from that doctor.
What year is this?
This was 16 years ago. I came in 2007-ish.
Okay.
And then we didn't. I wasn't taking the job. I hadn't seen anything but ice storm up here.
Yeah.
But they would call me about every month. Are you ready to come? Are you ready to come? We really want you. And I'm like, I said, no. But I had reached that crossroad in my life that I was done with medicine, and the experiences that I was having said that I was done. I had applied to dental school, and I I was done. And there was a very good book, Doubting God, I mentioned to you.
Yeah.
It says this minister at the end of it, right before he graduated from divinity school, he had the crisis moment, and he called his faculty, and his faculty said, we all go through that. He said, you feel like you're standing on the beach and the waves are washing the sand out from under your feet. And you're standing, he said, but you just have to stand still and understand that if you'll stand there long enough, that when that sand all washes away, what you end up is standing on a rock. And I actually, it's such a weird story. And my wife would roll her eyes long about now because she's heard it 5 million times. So many things God moved me to Mount Vernon, and people may not understand that, but we got lost driving home from Douglas an hour away, and I got lost on a 2-lane road in Georgia, which there was no turnoffs, and I made the wrong turn, which is my driving skills. And I said, I just don't know where we're going. And then about that time, this big road sign popped up that said Mount Vernon. Of course, it was Georgia. My wife looked at me and said, I really don't think you can be much more plain than this, David. And then the next day I walked in, and that experience happened, and I called Douglas, Georgia, and I said, I'm going to take the job.
Yeah.
And the hospital administrator said, we really want you. We had a board meeting last night. After prayer, the president of the board said, we want Dr. Asbery. But if he can't make the decision, God's got somewhere else he needs to be. So that door closed.
Yeah. And it's neat that they saw that.
They saw that.
Yeah.
I couldn't see that.
Yeah.
And then the other partner, who's actually, I still hold, he would have not, I would not have, I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't walked in and talked to me. And so the door there closed. So where I was at, so I had to literally get my family somewhere safe. And I said, okay, there's a couple colleges around there. I'm going to go there, take this employed job. And then I'm going to go back to get my MBA or my law degree. And the day I showed up in my office, and don't think there's never fights. There's always fights.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always hard times. If you think it's easy, then you're reading the Joel Osteen Bible. You're not reading my Bible. So I'm sorry, is that inappropriate to say? But literally, I had like 10 new patients, and God put such pivotal people as some of your first patients. Sarah Henniger came as first patient. I mean, all these wonderful people, and then people from Central Church, and my wife's Presbyterian, and she's very seated in Presbyterian Church, and like God put this church here, but that practice just boomed, and he just opened it up. So God closes doors, he opens doors, and sometimes he puts a really big dog to chase you through the door where he wants you to. And if you'll just finally give it to God and just then start working his plan, then things have worked out. Not easy.
Yeah.
Oh, not easy. And I think all those hard times, my first doctor that I worked with in North Carolina has lost his license for being bipolar. After he chased 2 other doctors off, and he was smart enough to get them to lose their license, he made it look like it was him. God protected me during that situation. Yeah. In Alabama, he taught me finances. And in Georgia, he taught me finances and how to shut my mouth a lot more. And many more lessons. And without every one of those boot camp moments, like the Marine Corps, those were all my boot camps. Yeah. I couldn't have come and served the community. Yeah. So that was a long drawn out. So much for your quick answer right there.
No, we were done with rapid. I just knew that we would get to a point where I just needed to get out of the way and get you started.
That's my testimony. I mean, and there's nothing that I have that I don't give directly to God. Yeah. Because I would not have come, if God had not brought me here, I'm sorry, y'all were Canadian. I mean, y'all were Chicagoans.
Northerns.
I came here and the community welcomed us so much, and this church welcomed us. My first memory was they used to do a thing called Downtown Bethlehem here. Yep. And I remember, and that was such a big production. I brought and my wife was very hesitant to come because she's Presbyterian. You don't get them out of their church very easy. No. And we came to Downtown Bethlehem, and we just kept on. And the first time we came to church here, and visited, because I would go to church with them, and then I'd come here to first, and then I'd go to church with them. And the first time I brought her here, and somebody stood up with their hands up in the air. It's like she grabbed my hand. I'm like, it's okay. They're not Presbyterians. They do these things, and she has an amazing voice herself, and so this church has been pivotal to our transition. But I really think God lined my first part of my life, and this sounds odd, to come to serve in Mount Vernon. Now, are there other doctors here now? Yes. Am I the popular person now? Not really. There's what the Eagles song, everybody's talking about the new kid in town. But, I'm still here serving. But before I came, there was nobody here, hardly. There was a few, and then there was doctors that were serving, but it was a year and a half to get in to see somebody. Everybody left town. But once again, and it's not about me. I think Casting Crowns, one of my favorite songs they have, is the only name to remember is Jesus. So when I close my practice, I really hope they don't remember my name. I hope they remembered somebody tried to do the walk successfully. I don't know. Only God can tell me that.
Yeah. I loved how when we were talking earlier, you really just see, not I want to say just, but you see yourself as a small town doctor caring for the community. And that lens is how you view everything that you do here in the community.
Well, I think it's not just me, because if I said it was just me, then I would be wrong. I mean, if you ever watch my wife, it's like every time there's a hole that needs filled, she's out there. And my kids, God bless them, they've always known that they are under the looking glass. They're expected to do better, because they have to be role models and everything. And they're not always, and none of us are saved by grace and not by acts. But I really, we wanted to make it a better place, because it's not just in the office. And I think I do a lot of procedures that I think there's one of my procedures that only 5 doctors in St. Louis can do, and we've done 300 of them in the last 6 years here. And so, and people are surprised that you can get that. But why can't small town people have the same care that you get in a big city? Yeah. And they used to laugh at me in the North Carolina mountains. One of the nurses said, Dr. Asbery said we're going to give the same Big Mac here that they're going to get over in Winston-Salem, because we have the same operating manual, but we're going to do it better, because we're at the soccer field with them, and we're in church with them, and we're at Walmart with them, and we actually care when we hand them the Big Mac. So, and I think that's one of the most important things is we may not have all the nice toys or always the support staff that we need, or the extra specialists, but when we're going to do it, we'll do it the same way, if not better.
So here's somebody that we need to talk about. You've been mentioning her the whole conversation. Tell us about Kathy. Tell us about how you guys met, and then go through how those kids popped into your story of building the practice here in Mount Vernon.
Kathy. So Kathy, people, and I think sometimes it's really hard for Kathy, because everybody sees her as Dr. Asbery's wife, but Dr. Asbery is not Dr. Asbery without Kathy Asbery.
She's a force.
I'm physically afraid and impressed. So, but Kathy is a child psychologist, master's degree level, passed to a PhD level. They take the same test. People don't realize that. And when I first met her, it was a blind date. I was at University of Kentucky. My best friend was at Charleston, West Virginia, at Huntington. And I used to nag his girlfriend about, set me up. And I don't know why I did this. And then so she set me up. So, okay, there goes this. I drove an hour and a half to see her. And I was supposed to originally be a family practitioner, and they leased me, my car I had was like, the doors were coming off and so forth. And so the family practice I was supposed to enjoy leased me a new car, and it was a 3000 GT. I was cool. I was hot. So, and I had my snakeskin boots, and I went on this blind date. I remember I got out of the car, and she had just got out of a relationship with a guy that was pre-med, and you have to understand my wife. She finished master's degree up in 4.5 years from the day she started undergrad.
Wow.
Yeah, she makes me look calm. Yeah. So she proceeded to make fun of my boots. My pants were a little too short. The boots were showing a little bit too much. And she made fun of the car. And I really think, like, for the first half of the date, we probably hated each other. And I laughed and said, there's about a dime difference between love and hate. And if the dime flips, then it goes really rapidly. Yeah. And by the second half of the date, we watched The Land Before Time, because, no movies were playing right then. We went a cartoon, I think. And then we never did anything else different than that. And she's put up with me. And my wife is just a force. She's been a single mom for the kids, because I've always been so dedicated to the job. And then she actually, kids, I actually wasn't sure I wanted any. Then we had one. And then the force of nature, we went to 3. And she's done so many things. At one point, while I was a resident in North Carolina, she community mental health. She always wanted to make a difference. She
Did both of you know that from the beginning, that was a very common thing for both of you that you shared, is your love of a small town community? And
No, I think, in fact, I really wasn't sure I was going to come back to a small town and everything, because I enjoyed Lexington, Kentucky, where I did medical school at, and Wilmington, North Carolina is a beach town that just I love it. It's just where you get brought to serve. So literally, when we were in Wilmington, and she was like, at one point was a child psychologist at the community health center, taught parenting classes to at-risk people, taught college classes, and then also one day a week managed what's called a neonatal intensive care follow-up clinic in North Carolina. She was in charge of that for all of southeastern North Carolina, which is every direction except for west. I always laugh about that. But so all the neonates that came out, graduated, she was actually in charge of a PhD psychologist who was not as qualified as her, managed PTs, OTs, and everything in this follow-up clinic. So, so if there's any doubt who runs the Asbery family, don't have a doubt.
Yeah.
And then we had a rough experience when we had our oldest son. She was still working, and our son initially went to a daycare, large daycare, one of those 200 people at a big city. He was always sick, even though he was breastfed.
yeah,
And then we took him out of that, put him with an in-home daycare, kind of a person kept it. And she accidentally, it wasn't intentionally, she left Caden in a minivan, forgot about him. Her kids were out of school, so her feng shui was off. And on a hot summer day, forgot about him in the back, and only by the grace of God, somebody walked by and heard him crying. And so state police brought the babysitter and Caden, our child, to my wife's office. And at that point, we made a decision that she would be, since we never lived in her family, that she would not work and I would work extra. And she's just always, she's the go-getter. She's really the go-getter. I'm just kind of the mule that pulls the cart. I get out there and work, but she's the one who's going around, see a need, fill a need, help a need. So
I think we share also adoption is in both of our stories.
It's huge. If we had had a boy and a girl, we would have been done. And maybe my retirement would have been liking that a lot more. But we had 3 boys, so we had Caden, and I only wanted one, and I wanted a boy, and she wanted a boy, and then had Cullen, and she wanted a girl. Because she wanted the opportunity to raise both. Yeah. And we had a boy, which I was kind of relaxed because, hey, I had everything bought already. And then we'll be done with this.
You saw the practicality.
Yeah. And then you just tell her there's something missing. So finally, and it's a funny story. It was a joke, but that we were in Macon, Georgia, and they had used 7 Series BMWs. I said, if you don't make me have another child, I'll buy this 7 Series, which I couldn't afford it anyway. We had another child. We had Liam, and so another boy. And the statistics are: if you have 2 of one gender, most likely the third will be the opposite. If you have a third at the same gender, most likely the fourth will be a same.
Yeah.
It was hard in the South. They valued girls or the boys.
Really?
Yeah. And people's words. Words are so hurtful. We would be walking through places, and we have to be careful. Our little boys are being marginalized in the modern world, and to an intense group, and they're throwaway, and you'd hear. My wife was in the Piggly Wiggly and heard somebody say, "Oh, 3 boys, my God," or what was the other one? We were walking on an airliner to go on a trip, and the 2 stewardesses that stand in the front. They were talking right as I walked by with the boys, and the bow got thrown off that when I was not very Christian that day. Oh my gosh, 3 boys! I'd kill myself. And I looked down and said, "Do you think they're deaf?"
Yeah.
I said, "They're not deaf." I said, "How dare you say that about my boys?"
Yeah.
And we marginalize boys in the modern world, and it's actually so sad. And then we decided to adopt, and I don't know how that happened, but in my wife's normal status, she had been planning this for years, and I had just no. And I'm actually home for dinner one night for a change when we lived in Queens Lake, and we're sitting there, and all of us were sitting around the table, which never happens in the Asbery family. And somebody's missing. Somebody's missing. 4.5 months later, we finished a domestic adoption. And once again, Central and actually Dan Knox was part of this. We were in California, and we had went through a law firm that helped with adoptions. I actually had a social worker. I heard her say, I heard her say, "Well, Dr. Asbery bought a child." No, we went through an adoption firm to make it a little bit legally easier, because it's vicious out there. So we were in California, and my office staff has always supported me so much. I can't do anything I do. It's not a me, it's a we. And literally, we were there 3 days, and the little girl had a C-section. So in California, they can't sign the papers. After that, because they've had narcotics on board. So we're staying at the hotel, and she was supposed to go on the next day and sign it, and she didn't. And she was supposed to go the next day, and she didn't. And then we had paid for a counselor to work with her, and we actually helped put her up in a nice place, and actually helped pay for community college for her, and she didn't do it. And we paid for trying to really be good stewards for her. And then I started pulling back. I'm like, this is going to go south. And Kathy was still just praying. And I picked up the phone. I called Dan, and I said, Dan, I need the prayer chain activated. And Dan was active in the church here then. And I would bet we had 3,000 or 4,000 people praying for us. And the next day, the little girl walked into the office. Now, her counselor had been gone for a couple of days. And so her counselor had made it back that day from a medical issue. But the counselor said she walked in and to sign the papers. And she said, well, what brought you in there? Well, I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing to do today. Yeah, I know what happened. I mean, it's just there's no doubt in my mind now. And so you can say, well, it was just a chain of fortunate events, but those fortunate events usually don't fall together that well. So, and then we have Eliana, and she's been such a massive. I don't feel like we're missing anybody anymore at 54. I'll just say that. But she's just been, and it's been such an amazing thing, because it's like the oldest and the youngest have a bond, and the second two have a bond, and you go through these cycles, and it's as a parent, you always worry when you're gone, will they have somebody? And I feel that the kids do. And it's been just an absolute blessing. Us hard at this age, but it's been a blessing. But God was involved in that every step of the way. He just and it was so disappointing. Another family was set up to adopt her, but they'd found out that the mom had done some stuff that she shouldn't. So they backed away. I'm like, well, good for us, bad for you, because you're not really that smart. You're not going buying a puppy. You're buying a human being. And our opinion was we didn't want to know any of that stuff, because I'm a doctor, my wife's a child psychologist. If God gives us a child with some difficulties, then guess what? Guess who should have it? You know, I mean, and so
He's equipped you to do that.
Yeah. I think He does not choose the equipped. God equips the chosen. And I think that's the truest thing. David was a little boy slinging a stone at a giant. Moses stuttered. Rahab was a prostitute. I mean, God does not choose the equipped at any point in the Bible. He always equips the chosen. And so He was going to equip us to handle that. We had the background, but I'm a gynecologist. Don't ask me anything medical other than that. And my wife's a child psychologist. She handles everything much more than I do. So
I think that is a full circle moment right there for us to know that you, as a little boy from a hard childhood in Middle Kentucky, for you to not and to struggle is, like you told us, your biggest fear, inadequacy, and that just goes back to that childhood. But knowing that along the way, and now at 54, for you to learn these lessons that you've learned in the midst of chaos, in the midst of those struggles, but to come out of it now at 54 and know, hey, I see God in that. Maybe I didn't see Him at that time, but I can see Him now. It
grew my relationship with Jesus Christ. And there's a Third Day was the name of the band. And I don't know if they're still around. And they have a song, Children of God. And I'd like to sit in at 3 a.m. when you don't have enough brain power to think, but you can still do deliveries. And so I watch, because it's like, it's like literally like muscle memory. And I'm watching a video, just mindlessly watching, and they're talking about, on Children of God, they're talking about adoption. And they start talking, and it's like people my age with these young children, they're talking about their adoption was so important. And then something weird happens. They start unbuttoning their shirts, and they're wearing T-shirts. I'm like, well, this is kind of awkward. And then all of them are wearing adopted. And the whole point of the video was so touching. It was like, what is Jesus Christ? Jesus Christ is my adoption policy. I'm a Gentile. I'm not a Jew. My best friend in residency was Jewish, and he used to, he said, he said, you're not Jewish, and then I know, but I'm adopted.
You are chosen.
And I'm chosen. And so, but that was the truest thing, because so my adoption not only cemented, my love for somebody, because I mean, I see no difference, in that child, but also cemented that I've been adopted. And just like I get frustrated with my kids, he gets frustrated with me.
Yep.
In fact, the other day somebody said, "What type of day are you having?" I said, "I'm having one of those days I just pray I'm not that fig tree."
Yeah.
They said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You need to read the Bible more." I said, "Jesus was hungry in that fig tree. I just don't want to be that fig tree today."
Just going to curse and shrivel up. And that, because I think, and this is going to be the hard thing for us. You've shared a lot of great stories, a lot of great lessons for us, but we're going to take a moment. We're going to take a break. And I didn't prep you for this one. We're going to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests, because we're going to continue this tradition. How has God been working in your life lately? We're going to ask you to just narrow it down to one thing that God has been working in your life lately. We're going to take a quick break, catch my breath,
Okay.
and we'll be right back. And we're back with Dr. David Asbery, and we're going to kind of sum things up, and we are going to finish up our conversation with the question, how has God been working in your life lately? David, it's up to you.
Yeah, I think, which I always laugh and said, early Alzheimer's, I feel like knowing the exact way to phrase it. You know, you get up at 4:30 in the morning, you get on that exercise bike that you really don't want to be on at 4:30 in the morning, and you don't turn the lights on because you hate light. And I like listen to a lot of online sermons from John Maxwell. And, you know, he's a leadership author, but he's really a minister at heart. And he goes back and speaks in church. And the other day I was listening to one of his, and I think he kind of defined where I find myself in my life right now is he was talking about, and I can't put it in the right words because it's been a few weeks, but he's talking about seeing through the moment. And his first example was the wise men. The wise men are going to find Jesus Christ. Of course, you know, we know that Jesus was probably around 18 months to 3 years old.
Yeah.
He wasn't a newborn baby in the manger. But he talks about how the wise men saw through the moment. You know, everything. People come to, he called it the shed moment. They come to the shed and they look at the baby, and it's like, oh, but they can't see that the problem is getting to the shed. So the shed is really their problem. And they'll avoid the shed. They won't go through the problem. They go around the shed, but they don't see the getting to the shed as an opportunity for growth. And I think that, and he even brings up the point, you know, it's when Paul was in prison, he's sitting there and he's in prison. Is Paul, Peter and Paul, I always get them messed up.
Well, they both had prison moments.
Both had prison terms, yes. Yeah, see? But oh, by the way, let me convert a few guards while I'm here.
Yeah.
And let me write letters to the church. So they had the ability to see through the shed moment.
Yeah.
They didn't get stuck in the shed. The back wall didn't hold them in, and they could see what was on the other side. And it's an odd question to ask because I've been going through that shed moment. I've been really trying to think, so what's the other side? So I've been working 110 hours a week for all these years and trying to grow practice for a rural community. And the world's hard between smartphones, social media, and the COVID experience. People are a little meaner and a little more testy and harder to deal with and more demanding. And once you get old and grumpy, you know, it's hard to keep the smile going on all day long. It's hard to keep your Jesus on, I say. And trying to see where to take the practice because you want to keep serving and you don't have the answers. So, you know, John Maxwell says to always make your decisions from the top of the peak, not the bottom, because decisions made from the bottom are desperation, have less than a 50% chance of being successful. And, you know, how long to keep practicing obstetrics, which I still love the obstetrics, but, you know, trying to grow it for the community. And so my decision has been, I like to read. And so one of the truest things I've ever heard says the only difference you're going to be in a year is the people you meet and the books you read. You'll be no different except for the two things, what you read and the people you meet. Those two things that'll change so you can stagnate or not. And so there's a good book for fathers because I was never a great father, really, because I really worked too much and everything. And it's called Better Fathers, Stronger Sons. And it says men reach a point in their life after they built their career, and I've always considered it more of a calling than a career, where they want to do the bigger picture. And I'm like, well, isn't this many patients like the bigger picture, God? You know, but it's like that's when they want to get active in their church. They want to go out and touch more and more and start to educate instead of do their career. And so trying to figure out how to, I've been asked for years to go teach a lot of my surgical skills that I can do that other people can't, and take faculty of liberty medical students. And so I'm kind of at that point, where's he working in my life? At what point can I spend a little bit more time with my kids? Without disappointing my patients.
Because that's the thing. You said I wasn't a great father. You're at that point where you're retrospect and you know, okay, I still can, I don't want to say correct this.
I can change. I can change. It's a tangential. And part of the thing is, and it's not, And once again, I don't consider when I tell people about the harder life growing up, it's not a pity party. Lake Me is 2 foot deep. Stand up and walk to the side. Nobody should ever drown in Lake Me. It builds you, and you learn so much for your patients. Patients thank me, but I learn from them all the time. And one of my favorite people that I went on that Brazil trip with was, oh gosh, he's our bass player here, and where's the superhero? Kyle.
I knew it. What superhero?
Yeah, Kyle. Kyle's just wisdom flowing forth. I mean, he's a handful too. And so he had told somebody in his family that was having a hard time with depression. He said, I told her she just needed to serve more. Mm-hmm. You know, and I've always used these phrases. My kids hate all my phrases. If you focus on your problems will become your focus. Mm-hmm. And so, suck it up, buttercup goes right with that one. So, I guess the Marine Corps has a lot of layover on me. So, and just, we're sitting there on the top of that riverboat going up in north of Manaus, going into the Amazon where you want to not get in the water, And he said, I told her to serve. And, 6 months later, she was off antidepressants and she was doing this and I couldn't get her to quit volunteering other than that so much. And I'm like, well, he just described what I've done my whole life, because growing up with that, when I'm serving other people, I don't obsess about issues. I also don't address them that well, but I also don't obsess, because I obsess on serving other people. And when I always concerned about being inadequate, is this patient like me? Am I getting them what they need? Am I being a good doctor for them? Am I giving them what they really deserve to receive? Am I really showing the mission statement as serving God through serving people? Am I really doing that today? And you obsess about that. So, but now the next thing is how do I fulfill those parts of my calling and grow myself for the next stage? Because there's only so many 24/7 calls for 3 days straight without sleeping that I can make, So
you believe you're at a point where you're ready for a new chapter.
I'm going to continue to practice medicine. I mean, I used to do 25 deliveries a month, and I've limited that to 14 or 15. That's usually established patients, and my practice continues to grow. When you're young, you think you're going to light the world on fire. Now I realize if I can just make a little corner a little bit better, I hope I've done something well. But, then it's like, then how can I actually reach out to the same thing they do at that Central Brazilian Missions? They seed a church, and then the junior pastor is taught, and the senior pastor teaches them, and the church grows up to junior pastor. Then a senior pastor moves on and sees another church, because the junior pastor really isn't far enough in his walk to be ready yet. To be ready. Yeah. So it's it's an upside down cake, but it works better than any I've ever seen. So is it time for the senior doctor to go out and start teaching the younger doctors, and hopefully make sure, because I see so much modern medicine has lost its status of being a calling, and it's become such a business, and as the corporate hospitals take over, people become procedures and not patients. Yeah. And so how do I relay some of that into some teaching and trying to work with that? Deaconess Hospitals come to the area, and that hospital really seems to believe their ministry. And so some opportunities have opened up. Now, and please, anybody listen, I am not closing the practice. I'm still going to be right here. But there may be a few days where I will go teach some of the advanced surgical skills that nobody else can do around to help out, or a few days that I can help out and things like that. And I think that's the thing, and how to do that without disappointing those people that I've been there 24/7 for, and for them to understand that I'm still there and I still love them and I'm still dedicating my life to them, but I'm trying to reach that bigger.
Well, before you do anything, you've got one more child at least that you got to deliver here at Central.
We've got a testimony here at Central which it's a HIPAA violation if I talk about it, but you can talk about it.
But I'll bring it up. Brooke Paninsky, she's about ready to pop.
She is, and she has so much, junk in that trunk about getting us there. And she's one that I have sweated. Somebody said, you just don't ever get nervous. You're so calm. I said, well, the Marine Corps taught me that when I was young. Never let it show. And my first job was bomb squad. It was to defuse landmines. So we always used to laugh and say we work the problem. We don't let the problem work us. Otherwise you die. So, we work the problem. But I think just her very pregnancy to me is just another testimony. I expected a baby at 24 weeks, and
here she is still.
She's still percolating along, much to her chagrin. I mean, it's like
she said she's ready. Yeah.
Yes, but the girl, I have so many people that just show me how inadequate I am. People like her that walk in this office, and she's hurting, and she has more reasons to hurt, and she's got this smile that just fills up the room.
Yeah.
And while she's doing it, she's taking care of foster kids. And while she's doing that, she's bouncing around on stage. And my wife's sitting next to me during church going, she's going to go into preterm labor. You need to tell her to quit bouncing like that much. I'm like, I know I've told her, but she won't quit bouncing.
Well, she took your advice.
Is she okay? Yeah. Is she sitting? And so, but every day, if you walk around, you're going to see little people that are walking. And I really think, people come say, oh, we like coming because you're a Christian practice. So I want you to come to me because of a good job.
Yeah.
I said, but I'm not going to hide the light under a basket.
Yeah.
I said, but I instead of me saying I'm a Christian-based practice, I want to know that my walk is showing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back to your core question, because my wife says that I have I'm a wandering non-specific in my conversation. That's where he's working on me. And that's an interesting question, because that one sermon at 4:30 in the morning on the exercise bike that I hate with a passion, and obviously don't use it near enough. And it was like, okay, am I avoiding the shed moment?
Yeah.
Or do I need to walk straight through that shed and come out the back door? And as I'm in the middle of the struggle getting through the shed, then because they saw baby Jesus, but then what did they do? They went home to tell the world about baby Jesus, which he was more toddler Jesus, but they went home to tell the world. It was like, okay, guess what I saw? They didn't sit there and just immediately die.
Yeah.
And that would have been the easy thing. I'm self-actualized now. I can just cease. So that's my shed moment, is how do I continue to make a difference and make sure that we hand it on to the next group.
Yeah.
And still serve where I have to serve.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the conversation right there.
All right.
Dr. David Asbery, thank you so much for sitting in with us, taking the time to tell some stories that I think, again, are some lessons that our listeners can hear and really impact. And I your final point about seeing through the shed, I think is going to matter, because in those moments in your past where you maybe didn't see through, but now you're able to see how God did work in those things.
Every one of them. If I turn around and look backwards, there's no really horrible moment that I didn't go through 10 years ago that I can't say. And if you've just got to make the effort, that's why.
Yeah.
That I could not do what I do today if he did not put me through that then.
Yeah.
I think so true on every step of the way.
Okay. Well,
All right.
that's what we'll call right there.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Doctor. And that's it for episode 50.
And the big 5-0.
Congratulations, John.
Back at you, Jared.
did
Good
it.
job, man.
It's almost a year now of episodes, because it's a weekly and there's 51.
Right.
So here we're gonna have to celebrate the year too.
Yeah.
We're excited about our next series coming up. It's a short one, 2 weeks, and Eric Lyday is gonna be part of it.
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
It's called The Songs We Sing, and really the heart behind it is just like we sing a lot of songs in worship, and even just singing as part of worship. Why is that? And I want to give Eric the opportunity to tell people that it's not just this random selection of whatever song comes to mind, but there's a process to it. There's kind of a filter that these things go through before they hit the stage on the weekend. And more than that, just the heart behind it. The first week, we're going to talk about choosing to praise. The second week, we're going to talk about giving to praise and everything that entails.
It's gonna be great. We will see you for the Central Weekly next week. Bye, everybody.